Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, and you can find us on social media at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. Every week, Mark and I bring up interesting topics in the wine and beverage world and speak to tastemakers and folks who are making it all happen in the wine world. How are you this week, Mark?
Everything's great, Kim. Excited for another interview today.
Yes, great. So today we have another special guest with us. We have a new topic tonight that I don't think we have really explored too much. We are going to be talking about non-alcoholic and low or removed alcohol beverages with Rachel Martin, who is the founder and CEO of Oceano Wines. My pleasure to welcome Rachel to the show. So hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Kim. Hi, Mark. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. So this is a new topic for us. You know, usually we talk about wine, sometimes spirits. We've had beer folks, whiskey folks, but we haven't really delved too much into what do we even, I guess it's a question that I want to kind of jump into with you is how do we even refer to this segment of the drinks market for beverages for adults that are similar to, you know, our wines, our beers, our spirits, our traditional alcoholic beverages, but that don't contain any alcohol. So this is, you know, something that is trending in our market, both in the United States as well as abroad. So kind of want to get your insights and your definition of this part of the market, I suppose.
Sure. Well, generally, we refer to it as adult non-alcoholic beverages. And that's because we don't want them to be confused with sodas or other beverages that do not contain alcohol. We also call them zero proof beverages, mindful drinking beverages. There are a lot of different ways to refer to them, but generally speaking, we consider them adult non-alcoholic beverages.
And this runs the gamut of beverages that are wine-like, beer-like, spirits-like, but then there's also some cannabis-related beverages in there as well, correct?
Yes, definitely. There's cannabis. And, you know, this is all so new and innovations are happening in real time. So we are working on defining, but I really believe that people should speak about them in whatever way makes them feel comfortable. We do define some language around it, and I am an expert in the non-alcoholic wine space, reduced alcohol wine space, as well as the full-strength wine space. But I am not an expert in cannabis, but we call them cannabis beverages, or, you know, there's a certification program for that. And then as far as non-alcoholic wine is concerned, we don't really have to say adult non-alcoholic wine because it's inferred, but we also call it alcohol-free, alcohol-removed wine.
So, Rachel, you have done an amazing job and getting a lot of credit lately, a lot of press regarding the certification. You call it the AFNA wine certification, alcohol-free, non-alcoholic certification. The website for our listeners is alcoholfreeaficionados.com. And I wanted to ask you about, in general, you started a winery, you put together this program. What came first, the non-alcoholic winery or this program? I'm just trying to figure out your background
Sure.
of what developed, how this all came about.
Exactly. Well, I've been a wine drinker for some time and then became a wine producer by way of my family's vineyard and winery, which we established early on, the vineyard just about 20 years ago or so. And then in 2016, I founded my own winery, which is called Oceano Wines is the name of the company. And then in 2022, I was recognizing the growth in non-alcoholic and alcohol removed wines. And I saw a missing piece where there were wine lovers looking to reduce their consumption of alcohol without eliminating wine from their lives, but their needs weren't being met as far as quality. And so in 2022, I saw the market opportunity and the lack of viable options in the space. And that's when I got interested in producing non-alcoholic wine. So that was our first vintage. While I was doing that, I was researching the space and scrubbing LinkedIn and reading everything that I could. And I came across the aficionado program and went to the website. And I saw there was non-alcoholic beer certification, cannabis was coming on, and also there was a marker for non-alcoholic wine, but there was nothing there. So I reached out to the founder, Megan Koester, to see what was the timeline. And she was looking for someone to lead that program. And I volunteered myself. So that was in 2023 that I reached out to Megan, and we came to an agreement. I got cracking, started working, and we launched AFNA Wine Certified in August. So it took me some time. It's a pretty hefty program. It required keeping up in real time. Like I said earlier, it's really, innovation is constantly happening. And as I was writing, things were changing. So it's a really exciting program, up to speed and ahead of the curve of what is known within the space. So people can really benefit from learning more about, all facets as far as like the history, the styles of wine, terminology, labeling, how it's made, how the alcohol is removed, what that does to the wine, stability, storage, on and on and on, sensory evaluation, marketing. It's just chock full of great information to not only help people enjoy non-alcoholic wines more, but also for the industry. And so that's setting standards as far as selling and serving these beverages.
Your point to it being sort of innovative and the program, this educational program that only launched a few months ago. Mark and I have been following trends in the beverage industry since we started doing this podcast, but even before we started doing this podcast. And this has been one of, I would say, the most drastic, important, one of those new things that really seems to be changing our industry is this more of a focus on some of these no or low alcohol products. And there have been lower alcohol or no alcohol wines in the market for quite a while, but, it's always been something that is so, I think, removed from, or at least different from what a, quote unquote, regular wine tastes like, that it's, to finally start to have things in the market that are closer in flavor, in style to what people expect out of a glass of wine. Like, this seems to be a very kind of new development for us.
It's really the premiumization of the non-alcoholic wine space that has changed everything. So people are selecting, like, say for us, for example, Oceano Zero, our non-alcoholic wines, we're selecting vineyards that have high quality grapes being grown, organic farming, industry speak, really exciting clones of each grape variety. And we're using high quality barrels, French barrels, et cetera, et cetera. So what's happening is people are making better wines to be designated as non-alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And also the technology is improving as far as aroma recovery from the distillate. So when you separate the alcohol from the wine, that aroma recovery and reintroduction into the alcohol removed wine has improved. So we're just, better products are coming out and they're more accepted by consumers because they smell like wine and they're tasting like wine. Early on, it was the case that there was a lot of sugar added.
Yeah.
to non-alcoholic wines. So they didn't really, there weren't any dry non-alcoholic wines. So they tasted kind of like either sweet wines or something other than wine.
Yeah.
And then
I
also,
remember back in
yeah,
the day,
and
like
then
15, 20 years ago when they were introduced, and it was like, what is
and they
this?
smelled funny,
Yep.
and they smelled cooked or something of that nature. But that's really improving, and everything started in Germany as far
Mm.
as alcohol removal is concerned, and the European wines have really led the quality spectrum. But now that technology is becoming available in the United States, so we're going to see even more improvement in the next year.
Rachel, talk about that Oceano Zero line. I saw something where it was the first in the US. Was that the first to use quality grapes and vintage dating? What was the first
Yeah,
milestone that
it
you
was
made?
in the US. It was the first single vineyard, vintage dated, non-alcoholic wines from heritage vineyards, from recognized vineyards, using the highest quality everything. So the highest quality barrel program. And we're truly the ones who are making those wines. There have always been wineries that are producing non-alcoholic wines, but recently there have been many companies that are non-alcoholic wine companies that are purchasing either bulk wine and having it the alcohol removed, or partnering with companies that provide that service. So they are essentially white labeling on these non-alcoholic wines. Someone's going to come out of the woodwork and say, oh yeah, well, we did it first. So why don't we just say we were among the first to produce luxury non-alcoholic wines with vintage, with vineyard designated, true sense of place. So yeah, that was Oceano Zero Pinot Noir 2022 vintage from Spanish Springs Vineyard on the San Luis Obispo Coast AVA. And now we're working with other vineyards in Santa Lucia Highlands, in Sonoma, and on the West Sonoma coast, specifically designated to be Oceano Zero.
So I had the pleasure of taking and completing your wine course, and I learned a lot. I've been selling these wines for years, but I always wanted to go that next level and educate myself so I could educate others. And I was wondering if you could just quickly give our listeners an overview of some of the terms they might see on these wines when they're on the shelf, when they're shopping for them.
Sure. It's really important to look at the back labels or the labels of these wines, and you will see the alcohol percentage. So to be considered a non-alcoholic wine, it has to be less than 0.5% alcohol. So if you're someone who wants to steer clear of any amount of alcohol, then you can look for alcohol-free wines, and those will be 0.0% alcohol. And I believe it's 0.005% can be considered 0% alcohol wines. So that's important because there is a sensitivity, and people deserve to know if there is any trace of alcohol within the wine. But I would also recommend looking at the ingredients. There are different ingredients that are added to non-alcoholic wine, and some of those ingredients might be an allergen or you might object to it. I would also recommend looking at the caloric content of these wines to see if it, even though they're going to be less than a glass of traditional wine or fully alcoholic wine, it's just something to note. And then if you don't enjoy certain types of sweeteners, we've been using sugar, cane sugar, liquid sugar to our wines to balance them. It's to balance the acidity. It's not to sweeten the wine, but you'll see other, maybe like monk fruit or grape juice. And there are also products that are not wine, not non-alcoholic wine. So we call them, say, like culinary beverage. And there are some great producers out there producing beverages that have complexity like wine does, but they are not non-alcoholic wines. So say, for example, there's somebody out there who doesn't want to consume any alcohol, not even a trace, not even zero proof or alcohol free, but they want to have a complex experience and a presentation that's similar to wine. They might want to look up one of those products. Those would be a few things that I would look for when you're shopping for non-alcoholic wine. And then, of course, there's a vintage. And then, where did this wine come from? Do you want to shop for a wine that there's where the grapes were grown? There's some traceability. So I definitely would recommend, like, say you're a wine lover and you're looking to reduce your consumption of alcohol, but you don't want to give up wine because, it enhances your life. You like it with food, whatever, but you want it to be more similar to the experience that you have with traditional wine. You'll want to look for designation of region, or say it's Napa or something of that nature.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone exploring all things wine with you. You can find out all about us on our website, thewww.wine, and you can follow us on all social media at The Wonderful World of Wine. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. Today, we're talking NA Wine with Rachel Martin. Rachel is the founder and CEO of Oceano Wines and the co-founder and program author for the AFNA Wine Certification Program, and that website is alcoholfreeaficionados.com. We're talking NA Wines with Rachel Martin. And Rachel, I wanted to ask you and follow up on, you were talking about ingredients or additives. One of the things I've always had, I guess I want to say an issue with on non-alcoholic wines was with regular wines, I don't like things that are manipulated. And I always kind of teach people how to look at wines to see what's going on with them. And you mentioned earlier what to look for on these labels. Can you talk a little bit about what is being done? And do you feel that the process of removing the alcohol or additives like Velcorin are not a good thing for the product? Or is that why people might shun away from them a little bit?
Well, there are things added to non-alcoholic wines that are also added to traditional wines, but they're not on the label because there is no ingredient label to traditional wines. So, for example, with traditional wine, you might capitalize, meaning add sugar to increase the alcohol content so that you have a more balanced wine, or you might add potassium carbonate to lower the acid level so that you make a more balanced wine. And Velcorin is also used with traditional wines. It's an antimicrobial, it's a stabilizer, and it's not uncommon with traditional wine. So I think there's just some misunderstanding that non-alcoholic wines have grossly more additions made to them just because you can read it on the label. Now, as far as sugar is concerned, there are traditional wines that they're not just adding sugar because they're trying to increase the alcohol content, but they may be adding sugar to sweeten the palate. So they're looking for a specific target consumer that likes a sweeter wine. But typically what you're going to find is body enhancers in non-alcoholic wine more so than traditional wine, even though it is used in traditional wine. What we do with Oceano Zero is to add body to our wines. We are doing a lot of lees stirring. So that is adding texture to the wine during the aging process within the barrel. And so knowing that we're going to lack body once we remove the alcohol, which, alcohol adds body to wine, that in its absence, we still want to have mouthfeel. So we're doing a lot of handwork, a lot of barrel stirring, lees stirring. Now that is not for every every wine because it's labor intensive and it increased the production costs. But there are some non-alcoholic wines that add thickeners like gums or glycerin, perhaps. So those might be things that you are susceptible to, perhaps, or don't want to ingest. We also add some yeast proteins, depending on the vintage, may add yeast proteins to the wine, in addition to all the barrel stirring that we do. That's a stylistic decision. These things are added in foods as well. So this is not unique to non-alcoholic wine or across beverages or foods. You could pick up a packaged good and perhaps those ingredients are so darn hard to read, you don't even really know what's in your food. So I think I understand, Mark, your concern, but I think it's unfair to pin it solely on non-alcoholic wine.
Yeah, and you mentioned foods, and one of the things about non-alcoholic wines is they're regulated by the FDA, not the TTB. So is that something you see, since you work with regular wines and the non-alcoholic, do you see that the FDA labeling is more informative and helpful for a drinker?
Well, the TTB regulates the production of wine, but as you said, not the labeling of non-alcoholic wine. There is a lot of chatter about traditional wines, including ingredient lists. We'll see how that resolves itself. I think it's great that consumers can be knowledgeable about what's in the products that they're consuming. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have ingredient lists or to know how many calories you're consuming. I think it's a really good thing. For some reason, some industry folks think that it would scare consumers or cause a problem with the sale of these beverages. Now, we all know that there's a problem in the alcohol industry. People are drinking less. So I think that's a fear that is not based in reality. So to answer your question, it would provide a service for these beverages to educate the consumer about what's inside them.
I kind of like that spin on it, that when we hear talk about the idea of adding nutrition information or ingredient labels or calorie counts or whatever on alcoholic beverages, one of the main things that always comes up is people are like, this is going to scare people away. But I like your take on it, that more information actually would make consumers more knowledgeable about what is in the bottle or in the glass, and then when they get to make that decision for themselves, that they could be more confident in their decision because they now can see what it is that is actually in that product.
I mean, absolutely. I think it's the right thing to do. Let's respect people, respect consumers.
Rachel, let's talk about the shelf life of these NA wines and how people go about storing them. I know some have expiration dates as well. Is there a way that they should be aged? Do they age? And do you recommend decanting like a traditional wine?
It depends on the wine. First of all, there are best by dates on all of these products. So when you're looking at the label, check out the best by date and make sure it's not out of date in the store that you're shopping.
What do you give for your shelf life on your wine? Is it a year, 2 years?
We give 24 months for 2 years on our wines. They may last longer. It doesn't mean that it's not consumable. It just means that it's not showing as intended by the producer. But I would say it remains to be seen as the quality increases how long these products can last. Storing these wines, they should not be in the light. They should be in a cool, dark place, just like any wine. And once they're opened, they should be chilled. So once they're opened, you have a glass of wine, you're not going to have it for another day or whatever. You can pump the air out and then store it in the refrigerator, and it could last you 3 to 5 days. I also want to just mention about closures. So typically non-alcoholic wines are, closed in screw caps because oxygen degrades the wine very quickly, especially in non-alcoholic wine, faster than traditional wines. So be mindful of that. If you have a cork on a non-alcoholic wine bottle, it may age more rapidly. Now, all of these products are going to age, but it would age more rapidly and become oxidized more quickly. So the screw cap wine should be stored upright, and the cork closed wines should be stored on their sides, just like traditional wines. And as far as aeration, I like for my wines, Oceano Zero wines, to have some air. It depends on how redolent the aromatics are. So our wines are extremely aromatic, even though the alcohol has been removed, and alcohol is a vehicle for aroma delivery. However, there is truth to opening the bottle, pouring it in the glass, and it develops in the glass. It's bottled. It comes from a large volume into a very small container comparably, and it needs some time to open back up. So even when these wines are bottled, our wines I can speak to directly, we like to hold them in bottle for at least a month before release so the wines can show their best. So it's very similar to traditional wine. However, it's the oxygen that degrades it more quickly because of the lack of alcohol content.
Well, Mark is a big fan of decanting and aerating pretty much everything. So I'm sure he's happy to hear that little bit of note.
Yeah. I mean, when's the last time you had a glass of non-alcoholic wine?
Yeah, I've never decanted one. I'll tell you that. I've tried a lot of them, but I've never decanted them. And you talk about the shelf life. I've seen some that have actually looked like they've oxidized, but have tasted just fine.
That might be from the alcohol. It depends on the method of alcohol removal. It could have been beat up along the way. And, if you take, I know you have, but if one takes our AFNA wine certified program, we have a chapter on sensory evaluation and faults, and you can learn more about the indicators of fault.
So that was actually going to be my next question for our listeners. I have a feeling that a lot of people don't understand how a wine gets to be from a traditional bottle of wine or style of wine to becoming a alcohol removed product. Can you kind of give the quick 2-minute description of technically how that happens?
Sure, absolutely. So all non-alcoholic wines start out as traditional wines with their full alcohol content, and they can be made in different fashions. So they could be barrel fermented, like ours. Our whites are barrel fermented and aged, and our reds are stainless steel and then aged. Both are in French oak. And then after the full aging process, and we feel that the wine is ready to come out of barrel, then we filter our wines, just a gross filtration. We don't own, and very few non-alcoholic wine companies own their own alcohol removal system. We transfer our wines to our alcohol removal partner, and then there are different methods of alcohol removal. There could be by pressure and filtration, and the other type of removal is thermal. So our wines, the alcohol is removed by vacuum distillation. So that's essentially heating the wine and to remove the alcohol and the distillate. The alcohol is captured in another chamber, and the aromatic compounds are extracted and concentrated from the distillate, and they're in a solution of ethanol. So I should probably be calling it ethanol instead of alcohol. In ethanol, and that's reintroduced into the wine, and that adds more of that aromatic quality and flavor complexity. And then after that, we look at balancing the wine. So the alcohol adds texture and sweetness and balances the acidity, as well as volatilizes those aromatic compounds. So it becomes very, aromatic when you smell a wine with alcohol. So there are different methods to correcting or preparing the wine for market. And as I said before, we do a lot of lees stirring for body component, and then may or may not, depending on the wine, add some yeast protein to build body. And we add a little bit of sugar to balance the acidity. And that's pretty much it. So, but it depends on the different producers. Some are adding botanicals to their non-alcoholic wines. Some are adding gums or thickeners, different types of thickeners. Some are adding grape juice concentrate. Others are adding juice. There are some non-alcoholic wines that are not as traditionally made, and they could have grape juice or lemon juice or even sparkling water added to them. That's why it's so important to look at the labels and the ingredients, just so you're informed. And then the wines need some inhibitor, and we use Velcorin, and that is an antimicrobial agent. And we use that because there could be funky stuff going on within the packaging, and it increases the longevity of the wine, the non-alcoholic wine in bottle. Now, alcohol is a stabilizer and naturally and increases the shelf life products. So it really helps to read the ingredient lists. And if you're really interested in these products, do a little bit of research and learn more about the producers and their methods and their ideologies. So essentially, it's grapes are harvested, they're made into wine in the winery through yeast consuming sugars, producing alcohol and all these beautiful complexity and aromatics and flavor compounds. And then the alcohol is removed, and that what we call the wine matrix, that changes the wine matrix. And we are using certain ingredients to prepare them for market consumption.
Over the years, I think the most popular style I've sold of non-alcoholic wines is carbonated or bubbly versions of it. And Kim is our bubbly queen here on the show. Can you explain to the listeners, is a sparkling non-alcoholic wine a good starter for someone who wants to get into these? And do you feel like the bubbles help in any way for non-alcoholic wines, or the carbonation helps?
I think sparkling non-alcoholic wines are great for celebration, and it's a good first taste into the non-alcoholic wine category. Those bubbles add texture, mouthfeel. They also enhance the aromatics because they're delivering those aroma compounds through the carbonation. Sparkling non-alcoholic wines are typically produced through carbonating still wines. You can't remove alcohol from a traditional method sparkling wine and retaining the carbonation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd lose the bubble if you tried to do it after the fact, right?
Exactly. So I think that in the beginning of the popularity of non-alcoholic wine, it was a sure bet to reach for a sparkling non-alcoholic wine, but it's not the case anymore, as the quality is getting so much better for still non-alcoholic wines. I would say I would look at the ingredients, of course, the origin of the wine, making sure that it's coming from a designated area, so you know where the wine is coming from, and also the price. So if you have a cheap non-alcoholic wine under $10, that's not going to be a high quality wine to begin with. And when you remove the alcohol, you're removing, in the very least, the volume of alcohol. So if you have a 14% alcohol wine, you remove the alcohol, you remove 14% of that volume. So your production costs go up that much. And different methods of alcohol removal, you could remove even more. So just consider that when you look at pricing for non-alcoholic wines. There are certainly decent products that are lower price points, but not always, just even with traditional wines, but yet it still is reflective of the costs of production of those wines. So I would say maybe that would be a better indicator of quality than whether it's still or sparkling.
That's such a good point that I had not considered before is when you remove the alcohol, you're removing that percentage of the volume of the wine. I don't know why that never occurred to me before, but it's like, okay, 13% of this is just gone because that's the alcohol. Okay, a little light bulb moment here for me.
Yeah, exactly. And so people think, why the heck is this more expensive, or why is it as expensive as traditional wine if it doesn't have any of the alcohol? Well, that's the benefit, right? These wines are meticulously made or have a lot of high production costs because there is no alcohol within it.
You talked earlier about these non-alcoholic wines have been made for a while in high quality in Germany. And a lot of times Kim and I like to tell, the wine stories in the wine world. Is there a history of stories and family vineyards in this line of wines to get people more interested in them? Is there a lot of stories behind them? I know you have a great story. Are you finding others out there in the wine world?
There are definitely great stories, and that's even within the history of non-alcoholic wine. So the vacuum distillation was invented by Carl Jung Winery, which was in 1908. And he was a German winemaker, and he pioneered the vacuum distillation. And his family winery laid the foundation for the modern non-alcoholic wine movement and innovation. So that is, I guess, like the grandfather of the non-alcoholic wine industry. And there are other wineries like Leitz, which is another German winery that makes wines with alcohol too, and they make delicious non-alcoholic wines. So Germany is the birthplace, but it has spread throughout Europe, and there are some great examples of non-alcoholic wine there. And luckily now these methods have been further improved, and there are different systems that are coming to the United States, such as Solos. And that is that extraction that I was talking about of the aromatic compounds from the distillate, that aroma recovery capture. That's a solid phase extraction. That is the Solos patented method. And then there's Clear Alc, which is also coming to the United States to be set up. And then another company that's doing instead of vacuum distillation, doing a enhanced filtration of removing the alcohol from the wine in a different way. So that, as I was talking about before, the pressure and filtration as opposed to a thermal application, and that company is called Alter. But they're not in Europe either. They're new to this process, and there's just so many incredibly exciting alcohol removal systems that are going to be widely available, but also newly coming to the United States. So we're just going to see these products improve rapidly.
Wow,
we're at the infancy.
Yeah, like there's all of this innovation that's going to be coming down the road. So very interesting to learn about it at this stage where it's still fairly new for the actual premium fine wine market.
It's harder to produce non-alcoholic wine than non-alcoholic beer. Because shoot me, but it's a more complex product. There's more complexity in the aromatics. There's less alcohol in beer than wine. And so it's harder to do. So generally speaking, the industry's been saying, oh, you can't make good non-alcoholic wine. See, well, we haven't had innovation necessary to respect the quality of these products after the alcohol's been removed until now.
So just to remind our listeners, Rachel's website for her wines is oceanowines.com. And if you were interested in taking this new groundbreaking wine, non-alcoholic wine certification, it's alcoholfreeaficionados.com. And currently, Rachel's wines are not being distributed in mass, but you can have them shipped to you, and you can find them in some non-alcoholic specialty shops here in Massachusetts. I believe Rachel was telling me there's a place in Cambridge that you can get it, but they'll gladly ship them to you.
Yes, it's also in the South End, and that retail shop is called Dre Drinks.
So you'll see more and more of these on the shelf. And Rachel, I want to thank you for everything you do for the non-alcoholic movement. And I appreciate how you approach things when there's negative stuff out there. You kind of just say, educate yourself and take my course. I like the way you handle those types of situations. People need to be educated. It's eye-opening to learn things about the product to bring these to my customers. I know that. So thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, with our special guest today, Rachel Martin of oceanowines.com. You can find us on all of our social media at The Wonderful World of Wine, as well as our website, thewww.wine. We are supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes. Cheers!
Cheers.